Yeah, thank you guys for waiting. So glad that we're patched in finally. I'm John Dioria, editor-in-chief of Base Magazine. We've been having some technical difficulties. You guys just missed probably the most amazing Victor Wooten performance for the last 45 minutes you'll never see anywhere.
Yeah, done now.
Now he's done.
Just
So
glad I was there.
Bye-bye.
you're gonna watch Victor cook dinner now. That's the new deal. But anyways, joined with us is Base Magazine's senior editor, Chris Giese. You can say, I don't know what box he's in there. And then our host of the Nashville Lowdown, we have the amazing Rod Taylor in Nashville. And of course, the man who needs no introduction, the amazing Victor Wooten.
I like introductions.
Yeah, okay. Well, we'll scratch that next time. We can't edit this, but...
Formerly a violin player?
Yeah, I think, well, you play cello, Vic, right? That's the main instrument?
Well, he was a violin player for a little bit.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's good. So this is the first installment of the Nashville Lowdown series where our man Rod Taylor is going to be sitting and chatting with Nashville bass players from legends and session aces to, the whole spectrum. And we're so thrilled to be kicking it off with Victor. So we're going to let them get into it. And then you guys can ask your questions down in the comments. Chris and I will be relaying those to them because there's a slight lag. Again, sorry for the technical difficulties. We were slapping and popping our way through them. Nothing was working. We did a little tapping and it settled it up. So happy to be here. And we're going to let Rod take it away now with Vic.
Yeah, just a heads up, Mr. John there in the last couple of weeks just had a new baby. And all babies are new at some point.
Yeah.
But
I got them used. It was cheaper that way,
Yeah. And I just have to say that, working with John and Chris at Base Magazine, after years of working with a lot of magazines that have been great, it's just an absolute pleasure. These guys have bass players' interest in mind. They're both amazing players. They're both connected to the industry. And as this event is evidence of, they're very patient and creative and thinking about this. And when I took this idea to them, they were real thrilled about it. And I'm thankful that they were able to do that. So thanks, Chris and John, for your support for the bass community. And thanks, Victor, for being willing to be the guinea pig on this first run-through as we figure this out.
Well, thanks for doing it. We'll let you two get to it. Again, comments is where you can ask your questions and make them Nashville session-based, something obviously of the topic. And we'll get them over to Vic. He'll answer them live. So enjoy it.
Sounds good. So right off the bat, I should probably explain that with this series that Victor's the first one to join us on. The focus will always be Nashville, the Nashville music scene, and we'll be focusing on kind of what it means to be a Nashville bass player, what it means to be involved in the Nashville scene, and all the players interviewed for this series, which will eventually take place here on the stage I'm sitting on in my house in a rehearsal place. But right now, because of coronavirus and such, we want to keep it safe. And so we're doing it virtually. But a couple people to thank right off the bat for this. Believe it or not, we had 2 test runs where this worked perfectly in the last week and a half, just because we didn't want to have technical problems. and it worked, and it worked pretty easily. But people that helped us with that were some local musicians in town who would get on and give us some feedback, and that's bass player and singer Matt Cohen for the band Radio Pirates, been a real help. Morgan Taylor, bass player from Burns, Tennessee. David Boisvert, saxophone player. My wife, all have been kind of helping us figure this out because we're using Zoom to do this. It's a little more complicated. But we figured it out tonight after a mere 45 minutes, so no problem there. I do want to say that having Victor be the first guinea pig of this series is important to me because Victor was one of the first people to invite me to think about moving to Nashville. He started inviting me to Nashville back in the 90s when we became friends, and eventually it wasn't a hard sell. And I moved here back in 2013, and I love it. And I've been visiting here for 20-something years, and so it's a pleasure, Vic, to have you kick off this series because of what Nashville has come to mean to me through you, and now through living here. So I was wondering, Vic, as a way of kicking it off, and because people have been real patient and waited, do you mind just playing us a tune?
I'd be happy to.
Cool.
I'd be happy to. This one for me kind of has a little Nashville vibe to it. Now I'll see if I can pull this off. I haven't played this one in a long time. I don't even have a title for it. It's just new.
Nice.
Ah, that one
Love it.
sounds easier than it is.
That was great.
Thank you, Rod.
So to kind of jump into this with you, I know that you originally came to Nashville. I don't know that it was your intention to kind of make your home here, but
No, not at all.
why did you? What was it about Nashville that kind of grabbed you and made you decide to put your roots down here and to make it your home, to make have a family here? What was it about Nashville? This was back in the '80s, right?
Yeah, it was in late '80s, '87 when I first visited. And I first visited a friend of mine that I met at Busch Gardens, where I was playing bass and fiddle in Williamsburg, Virginia, literally playing some violin and bass in a country show. But there was another fiddle player there named Kurt Story, who was born and raised in Nashville, and we hit it off back in 1981. He invited me to visit. I finally came in '87. Being born and raised in Nashville, Kurt knew everybody. Bela Fleck, Sam Bush, Mark O'Connor, Edgar Meyer, Jerry Douglas, all these great musicians. And so when I visited Kurt, he introduced me to all of them. And one thing led to the other because of a bad record deal that caused the five of us brothers to not be playing together for a while. I was like, well, I'm not doing anything. I'll stay in Nashville. This woman, a great singer here in Nashville named Jonelle Mosser.
Yeah.
She asked me, will you sub in my band for a month? And that month has turned into whatever, 35 years or so. But to get more accurate, the music here was so different.
Yeah.
All the musicians were great. And surprising to me, and I hate to even have to say that, surprising to me, they really welcomed me.
Yeah.
Now, I stood out, for some obvious
little.
reasons, musically and other things, but they welcomed me. and it's been a great however many years.
Well, and on that note, I mean, you and I have talked about this over the years in a variety of ways, but you know, a black bass player coming to Nashville in the '80s. I mean, that's not really the scene, and not that that's not a big part of this community. I mean, Nashville's home to one of the historical, famously historical black colleges, Tennessee State University.
Yeah.
And Jefferson Street here has a long, rich history.
Sure.
Jimi Hendrix played it. There's a great
Yeah,
R&B and hip.
Fisk and the Jubilee Singers.
Yeah.
There's so much heritage here.
Right, but
It just
but-
wasn't well known. Yeah.
Exactly, and it still isn't. I think there's a whole documentary that needs to be put out about Jefferson Street.
Oh.
But at that time in the '80s, there were a number of black musicians coming to Nashville, and kind of involving. I mean, Tommy Sims, Willie Weeks,
Yep.
Jackie Street,
Yep.
drummers like J.D. Blair, other artists that were already here like Shannon Sanders, that
Billy
really
Cox.
involved themselves in genres that you wouldn't at that time especially wouldn't associate. You're a funk player, you're playing R&B, Motown tunes, and suddenly you're with a banjo player and a harmonica player.
Yeah.
How did you feel? I mean, did you think? Well, I know you thought about it at that time.
Of
And
course.
how do you feel Nashville has changed both in terms of music and styles and the kind of amalgamation of R&B and hip hop more into country? And how do you feel about it now?
Well, I love it. I wouldn't be here if I didn't not just like it, but love it. But, and this is my take on it, Nashville is now becoming Music City with a capital M.
Yeah.
And because the music was always here. There was a heavy gospel scene. All these artists from around the country were coming to Nashville to record their records because they're world-class studios at half the price, than New York or LA. So people were coming here and hanging out. So even when I was here, I got here in '88, I'm meeting all these people, Michael Brecker, right? And James Taylor and Tuck and Patty, and then Jack DeJohnette shows up at a gig. I'm like, whoa, all these people in Nashville. But it was a hip place. But what was being publicized was country music.
Right.
Now, through my years at Busch Gardens, I learned to love country music. Plus, my dad grew up singing it because he listened to the Grand Ole Opry as a kid on the radio. So I was aware of country music. It just wasn't my favorite, but I learned to love it. So moving here and starting to work with Bela Fleck just kind of helped solidify my love of the music. But it also really helped me infiltrate is not the right word. Just
Influence in a lot of ways.
influence and become a part of the Nashville scene. But I have to say again, they really welcomed me. Yeah.
Yeah, and do you feel between the '80s? I mean, even just visiting here since the '90s, I feel like there's been a shift. I mean, it's not the most cosmopolitan of places when you compare it to New York or to the Bay Area or L.A. But it to me it seems very welcoming. It's been very welcoming of a lot of genres coming here, and a lot of artists have thus moved from L.A. or New York to make this place their home, and that involves bass players. I was texting back and forth with Billy Sheehan today and Mike Elizondo, who are both recent, and Hugh McDonald, who are the last few years have moved here, all from L.A.
Yeah.
And they're set to do this program too, by the way.
Good.
So we'll get a chance to ask them why.
Yeah.
But do you feel there's been a marked difference between when you came here in Nashville and now in terms of just the scene, the way you function within it, and all of those things?
Sure. Yeah. The scene has definitely. I don't want to say it's changed. It's grown.
Okay.
Because downtown you still get you can go hear the best country music in the world. The Grand Ole Opry is still around. You'll hear the best country music in the world, but now when you go down 2nd Avenue or Broadway, that's not all you'll hear.
Right.
And I'm sure some people don't like that because it's not the same as it was, but a piece of what it was is still there. Some of the world's best musicians live in this city.
You bet.
It's amazing. And a lot of them play country music. Like every Monday night, you go down to 3rd and Lindsley and you listen to the Time Jumpers.
Yeah.
You can try to act like you don't like country music. Try your best. But show up on a Monday night and hear Vince Gill and oh, what's the singer? All of a sudden, my old brain is going out. They just added this new female singer.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Oh my goodness, unbelievable! Anyone who says they don't like country music, just come with me on a Monday night. The best three fiddle players,
Yeah,
steel
well,
guitar.
wasn't it
Oh,
Alison
pedal steel.
Krauss's drummer was playing for him?
Right.
The first time I saw that band was at the Station Inn. This was back when they played in the Station Inn. It was $5,
Yeah.
13-piece country swing band, and I remember sitting there thinking, "This is jazz.
Yes.
Like this is country western swing, and there's all this stuff going on. This is. I mean, it's obviously not jazz, but it's like that level of virtuosity and theoretical understanding at work
Sure.
within that when those guys stepped out with those fiddles. And
Right. It's
I
very
just-
related to jazz.
yeah.
Free
And it-
soloing and yeah.
Exactly, and the way they traded, traded fours and all the kind of things they did, that I was just like, and this was $5 at the Station Inn, which what serves pizza on paper plates. And Vince
Right.
Gill,
Right.
I mean, I knew he was a good guitarist, but after that show, I was like, okay, he sings well, but as a guitarist, he's off the charts.
Right.
And that's something I guess for someone who moved here later, I have wondered about is what it was like before, and also I think in country music, do you think that the influence? I hear an influence of R&B. I hear an influence of hip hop. I hear the influence of what used to be kind of confined to different regions in the U.S. come forward in country music now, in a way that gives it more rhythm. I mean, I remember when I really started listening to country music, I was like, the bass is finally doing some amazing things in there.
Yeah. A lot of that music came from that old gospel.
Yeah.
A lot of the gospel was black music,
Yeah.
where it came from old. When you hear this old country music, and Bill Monroe and before, but even Blue Moon of
Yeah.
Kentucky, we're getting talking about the blues.
You bet. That's
You
a
know?
Delta right there. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's so related. There's so much. I don't know if you can it's like incestual music wise.
Right.
Everything's blending together. But also Nashville, like all of America at the time, the ugly past, who didn't want to recognize
Yeah.
the people with colors influence. And it's getting better now. Nashville is about to open up the African American
That's right.
Museum. Amazing, right downtown.
Right
Amazing.
downtown.
But a lot of people don't know that the first star of the Grand Ole Opry was a black man who played harmonica, right? And and not long ago they finally let him get inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame. Now he's dead. His family's still around, and we're all advocating for him. But he finally got in there. So the town is changing and growing. And I really felt it wasn't my purpose for staying here. And this is going to sound very egotistical. And I don't mean it to be egotistical. I mean it as just how I feel. Once I was here and I was welcomed in by this community, again, I don't mean this ego-wise, but I realized Nashville needed me.
Yeah.
Okay? Well, let me change it. This doesn't sound as egotistical. Nashville needed people like me.
Right.
Nashville needed Willie Weeks, Tommy Sims, right? Jackie Street. Nashville needed that because we weren't just over in the east side of Nashville hanging with, other dark-skinned people. I was playing at the Bluebird Cafe,
Right.
swinging my bass around my neck,
That's
all
a low
the-
ceiling.
Low ceiling, I know, and a tight stage, so I had to be careful, right? But and the people were loving it. I was playing solo bass I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday night at a health food restaurant, and it was attracting people. One by one, my brothers came. So people think I'm crazy musically. My brothers is where I got it from. So one by one, they're coming. And now we've got these weekly gigs at the Grapevine Cafe or Mirabelle's, finally Third and Lindsley, and now Rudy's Jazz Room. Now, and this, again, it sounds egotistical, not just because of us, brothers, but we were a big part of it. There was some really excitement happening, not on the outskirts of town,
Right.
right in the middle of town. And people are like, this is okay? Really? So all of a sudden we get jazz guys. Jeff Coffin moves to town. Baylor's already here, but now he feels free to just play his weird music, and against, people were telling Baylor, I don't know if you should go with those two guys, my brother Roy and me.
Yeah.
I don't know, but Baylor's like, no, this is what I'm going to do. So a lot of what I owe, to my success, if you want to call it that, in Nashville, first starts with a guy named Kurt Story,
Yeah.
who had me come visit. Singer Jonelle Mosser, wonderful rock and soul. She's the one that had me stay. And at the time, I was hanging out with Mark O'Connor, great violinist. He let me sleep on his couch, and Bela Fleck, who both of them eventually gave me cars to drive, and just really helped my stay in Nashville become a whole lot easier, especially for me, my first time moving out of my parents' house.
Yeah.
Here I am having to pay rent. What's that, So there's a few people who really made it happen for me.
That's awesome. On that note of playing locally, you still, I mean, no one's playing locally right now, but, I'll get these calls every once in a while from you, and you'll say, hey, Rod, I'm playing down. I think the last time you did this, or one of the times that was the funniest and most fun for me, is you called and said, hey, I'm playing downtown at Sambuca. I think it was Sambuca, right?
Yep.
And I'm like, are you playing Victor or are you playing bass? And that was a joke, and you're like, I'm playing bass. And you were filling in for a band that was playing like 70s and 80s rock and funk.
Exactly.
And I'm like, I am so there. And it was Jenny,
Jenny Heft on drums.
Yeah.
It was her band. Yeah.
Yeah, and Kristen and I show up for that, my wife, and you're back in the shadows with a P bass.
With a P bass.
Oh my God. It was like the coolest gig. I mean,
Yeah.
all your other stuff aside, it was just, and I've seen you do that a number of times locally. Well, you'll just take a fill-in gig and where the bass player's, for lack of a better term, the bass player. Right. And what is it about that? I mean, you were just back there just smiling. And I remember at the break you came out and you're like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
And it's this little bitty restaurant. What's it about that thrills you?
Right now, everybody wants to make it. But once you do, people expect to see you the way they think you're supposed to be. So in other words, if people see me play, they immediately want a solo. They want some fireworks. They want a spin around the neck. That's all fun. But before all of that, I'm just a bass player. I love to play long notes. I love to support a vocalist. I love to not have to solo. I mean, now these days, I love not to solo. So that gig at Sambuca, you were the only person I called because I knew you'd appreciate it, especially playing a Fender.
Yeah.
And I told Jenny, I'll do the gig as long as you don't tell anybody. As long as you don't tell anybody, I'm happy to do it. I would pay her to do it because I don't get those calls. People don't think I can play bass, or they think I'd be bored to play bass.
That's right. That's right.
Right. So yeah, every once in a while I get to do it. I'll get a call just to play bass, and usually I have to turn them down because I'm gone away from home so much that I need that night at home.
Yeah.
With my family. But I know Jenny from high school. She was really needing someone, and I keep and every time she calls, I say, I'm sorry, I can't do it that night, but keep calling. That night I could do it.
Yeah.
So I check with my wife, I check with Holly. You cool if I go do this? She says, go for it. Let me make one phone call. Rod, check this out.
I still have this memory of you sitting back there with a bass slung low, and it was a 1964, 65 P bass that you owned.
65, yeah.
And I was just like, oh my goodness, it was so fat and thick, and
Yeah.
and tunes you guys were playing, and it was a highlight for me, having known you for over 2 decades now, to get you, and I've enjoyed that. On that note, with Nashville, I was wondering if you could share and then maybe provide a little bit of a short lesson about something that you've learned in Nashville that you feel like is you probably couldn't have learned somewhere else, but also what's something you could share to people watching, kind of something that you've learned as a bass player, musician at
Sure.
large in Nashville?
I'll share a few, just a couple of things. I won't take much time, but
Well,
one of the
make you
things that
big around here.
really struck me in Nashville, and it's something I never paid attention to until I got to Nashville, and it was tone. Nashville was all about tone, all about tone. Me, it was just about energy and making people dance, and and of course there was tone involved. I never thought about it, just played. Nashville was all about tone. I remember a good friend of mine, Joe Campito, before he passed away. Joe, we moved to Nashville kind of at the same time, but he came from upstate New York. I came from Virginia, but we hit it off. And he was a bass player, and I helped him buy some gear because he was getting some studio sessions. And at that time, if you showed up at the studio, even as a bass player, you needed to have your own preamp, your own EQ or whatever. You walked in with something. That was foreign to me. Well, I hadn't done much studio work coming from Virginia anyway, but when I would see that, I was like, wow. Guitar players had their racks. They'd come in, a guitar player would have what's called cartage. Means you pay someone to go get your gear from storage, bring it to the studio and set it up for you. But guitar players would have a full rack of stuff. And I'm like, whoa, I have no idea. I still to this day don't know how to run compression, you know? But everybody was into that. And so that was one, was tone. Another one was restraint. Okay.
Yeah.
Now I'm a bass player. People know what kind of bass player I am, But even when we played dance gigs growing up, we would elongate them. Reggie would take a solo. It wasn't as strict that I had to stay strict to the part. In Nashville, what I learned was how to restrain myself. And I started learning it at Busch Gardens in the country show because they didn't want improvising. They wanted it the same every show, right? And there might be a bass solo, but that was your chance to do something. But everything else was straight. And so I had to learn how to not do so much. And it was my wife, Holly, that made me realize that I don't listen to vocals. I hear the vocal as another instrument. I can sing the melody, but the words, what words, So I had to I started really paying attention. And here's two things that I learned. One came from one of the greatest mandolin players in the world, Mr. Sam Bush. So working with Bela, I got to work with and play with the best bluegrass and newgrass musicians in the world. Most of them lived in Nashville. But I'm a funky bass player, R&B. That's my thing first. So I'm playing with Sam, and we're playing bluegrass, right? And however long or short you hold that note changes everything, right? That was another thing. Whether it's here or long or a whole note, half, the whole beat with no space, difference. But I used to play it as funky as I like to do it. So I'd put a backbeat in there. That's the way I played it. Because that's just naturally how I play. Sam Bush was so kind to me. And he just said, Victor, will you please not do that? Don't put that backbeat in there. He said, that's my job. Right? And I realized, wow, most bluegrass bands don't have a drummer. It's the mandolin that's powering the rhythm. I was stepping on his toes. So I had to learn how not to do that. Right? But I noticed that when I cut it out, it allowed me to lengthen my nose when needed. Right?
Yeah.
And it was a small but powerful lesson. Now, he didn't have to be as nice to me when he told me that. But he told me a nice way, and I hope I never forget it. Never forget it. Another thing that country bass players do a lot is they will substitute the one chord, the root, with the third. Okay, and here's what I mean. So, so if I'm gonna put in my looping pedal. Okay, 1 to the 4, 6 minor to the 5, right? So I'm in G. I'm supposed to play a G there, right? But country music, sometimes instead of the G, they play the third.
Yeah.
Right? Here's the third of the 5. Right? 6 to the third of the 5. Right? Okay? So instead of playing the 1, I play the third. Right? Over the G. 4, 6 minor, and I could play the 5, or I could play the third over that. Right? That's nice from the bass part.
And
So
that's
where a
hard,
lot of
right?
these songs, say it again.
I said none of that's hard, right? But it's
None of it.
beautiful.
Beautiful. And when a song only has 4 chords, like a lot of country songs do, it needs some variety. And you can do that from the bottom up, you know. And it's very, very subtle. But I get a chance to jam with people or teach at colleges, and these young people don't know that simple little trick, you know, because it can also work in any other styles. But it's very, very, very prevalent in country music.
Nice. We have John's been texting me a few questions from people. It's okay to answer a few from our audience that's out there.
Okay.
So here's a couple. Hey, one's from Maryland. Quissette.
Marilyn
I think I'm
Quissette?
saying Quissette. Is that how you say her name?
Yeah. Oh,
I know her from your camp.
yes.
And she says, "Is Nashville too large now?" And we've both been in the last 5 years. It's grown. Is Nashville too large now? What do you think the future of Nashville is, especially for new musicians?
Yeah. It depends on what you call too large. The cool thing that I like about Nashville is you can drive just a few minutes and be surrounded by trees in the woods. I love that. Now, Nashville is growing fast. It's physically not the same city that it was in the 80s or the 90s or even the first half, you know, so far of early 2000s. There's tall buildings. Over the last 5 years, it's shot straight up. But it's still, for the most part, in my opinion, still has that South small town feel. People are still friendly. You go to Pancake Pantry, they're going to serve you with a smile. You know, I still get that small vibe feel. Now, there are a lot of people moving here. Yeah. So what it's becoming is a bigger city, but it's still not New York. It's still not L.A. And it's still not Atlanta.
Right.
Right? So for me, it's not too big. It's bigger than it was, but it isn't. But I still think there's a lot of opportunity here. People are still friendly, and the prices aren't as high yet. They're growing, but not as high as other places.
And
we love Marilyn.
I'm sorry?
I'm telling Marilyn we love her.
Oh, yeah.
Marilyn Quinset. She's beautiful.
Yeah, she's great. Thanks for chiming in with us.
Yeah.
When you're thinking about this, and this is from a question that's kind of tied to a couple of them, Vicky Warwick put this question in. Music cities, and there are different sizes of those in the U.S., right? You know, New Orleans is, of course, a music city. Chicago, New York, Seattle. But there are also smaller ones. You and I have both been to Fort Collins,
right?
Which is a pretty happening scene there. And this question kind of has to do with this current crisis, right? And the way it's just shut down music and entertainment at large. And she says, how do you think the COVID-19 is going to affect the music industry for better and for worse as we go forward? You know, because it won't, at least for a while, I think everyone agrees it won't be the same.
Right.
You know, and what's the silver lining in all of that? And that's a great question for you because you're always a person who doesn't stay in the negative space very long, if at all.
Right.
and immediately you think about what can we do to make this situation better. So
Yeah.
what's your thought on that, Vic?
Well, and these are just thoughts. Of course, I don't know. You know, I've heard so many people saying what, you know, what this means. The earth is this. I don't know what it means. I just know what I'm doing while it's doing it. The interesting thing for me is I've been home longer than I've ever been in probably 20 years or more, which is my kids' lives.
Right.
Literally have not been in one place like this with my family in my kids' whole lives. That's horrible. So the fact that I get to be here, sit at the dinner table with them, you know, wake them up for school, to do online school, all of that, to be, you know, here with Holly, help her cook or watch her cook. I should be more honest. You know, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. That part of it is wonderful. Now, I'm not saying the whole thing is wonderful. I have friends that are sick right now. I have other friends who have died, more friends whose parents have died. That's not beautiful. But even without the virus, I have that.
Yeah.
What I haven't had is home. This is forcing me to do it, and I'm making the most of it. I'm playing very little music because music is what, and I'll just talk about me and then I'll really answer the question. This is what I do. This is not who I am.
Right.
Right? I mean, I can put that down. Right? I can't get rid of this. This is who I am. And this is the chance for all of us to deal with who we are. And it saddens me that so many people don't like or even don't even know who they are.
That's right.
Right? My parents, fortunately, us brothers, our parents made sure we started there first of who we are. So this is a chance for me to reconnect because a lot of us can get lost and even define ourselves by what we do. And what you do is not usually who you are, you know.
Right.
It may be, but for me, I want to put the bass down sometimes and still be you know, somebody worthwhile without that instrument. This is giving me that chance. Now the music business is definitely changing, and I hope we don't go back to normal too soon. Okay? In any sense, because normal is what got us to this place.
Right.
So none of us should be shooting for normal. Right? This is our chance to come back to work on ourselves so we can surpass normal as soon as we're allowed out the house. Just come out of the gates rolling. But for the music business, here's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping that people will reawaken to the importance of music. Because the new generations thinks it should be free. Right?
Yeah.
They think it should be free. Now, you and I and Marilyn, when we were young, television was free.
Yeah.
And we paid for music. Right?
I see where you're going with this.
It's totally flipped around. Right? We expect it free. Right? You put out a record, Rod. I don't buy the whole thing. I go to listen to little clips. I find my favorite one or three, and I listen to those. And I think I've heard your whole record. I listen to them out of order. I don't hear your whole story. To me, it's like going to the movies or not going, find it online, picking the few scenes you like, watching them out of order, and then say, "Oh, I saw that movie." No, you didn't. Right? There are people like me that make our livings with music. And I'll go and play a show, and by the time I'm back at the hotel, it's on YouTube for free. No one should give my art away for free except me. So I'm hoping that with all this live stuff being taken away from us, that we will reawaken to the importance and the, what is it when something's worth something, the when you know, the worth, I guess, of music, of live music, because everybody realizes that live musicians are hurting. So what are we going to do when live music comes back? Are we just going to want to get in for free? Are we want to just download it or wait until the record's for free? Let's support these musicians. Let's support live music, right? Anything that's important in your life has a musical component to it, right? Imagine your party, your graduation, your wedding, or anything, marriage without music, right?
Yeah.
It's important. It's important. So let's support music, right? So hopefully that comes back. I could go on and on,
Well, yeah, and
but I
I
won't.
know that one of the challenges we're going to face is clubs, even as we slowly come back, are not going to be able to fill up, right? And so we may be playing gigs where we're only allowed 50 people in the room when it would have been allowed 100, but we're probably going to be paid the same,
Right.
or paid half, I should say, for
Yeah.
that, or something like that. And I think being prepared to think about how we can support that.
Yeah.
I also love the fact when you talk about albums, listening to things as an album. Two of my favorite concerts this year, we're going to see whole albums played in their entirety from beginning to end. One was Jeff Tate, Morgan Taylor, and I went to see that, and he played two albums back to back. And one of them was Queensrock, which I'm sorry, he was with Queensrock, Empire. And the other one was Eric Johnson,
Ah.
La Via Musicom. And Barry Mankin and I went together to that and just watched the whole album. And I had the album in my head as an album. So I think going back and listening to things as an album could be an interesting way to think about us going forward.
Listening to things as an album with people.
Yeah.
Nowadays, listening is a solo experience. I buy the album, I buy whatever, and I put my headphones in. I go about my business. Well, when we were young, we couldn't do that. We bought an album, we gathered together, we listened to both sides, we passed around the album credits, and it was a social gathering, and I miss that.
Yeah.
But
I do
I
too.
think people are going to be ready to go back out to the concerts, go back out to the clubs. I just hope we don't do it before it's ready. I'd hate to see more people die than that needs to. But there are clubs that are taking precautions now in different cities. They're putting, plexiglass barriers around. My thing for me, I'm not ready to hop on a plane and fly across country to do tours, or hop on a tight tour bus. I'm not ready for that yet. Plus I'm loving being home.
Sounds like it. One more question before I'm going to have you play a little bit more, if you don't mind. And this comes from, we have a couple here. One from Jeremy, and I hope I say is Clatouche. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. I'm sorry, Jeremy. Who asked about putting emotions in music.
Oh yeah.
And how we do that. And I think, and then Matt Cohen, of course, who I mentioned earlier, asked something about who are your favorite up and coming bass players.
Sure.
If you don't mind taking those both at one, and then we'll I know people have been patient and we're a lot later than we should be, but and then I'd love to have you play a little bit more music if you don't mind.
Yeah, I don't mind at all. Well, one of the first person, hearing that question coming from Matt Cohen, because I know Matt and because I know you, and we all know who I'm about to say, Mr. Scott Mulvihill. Yeah, I mean, we call him an up and coming bassist, but he ain't up and coming. It's just that more people are starting to know about him. This guy's been around. I was shocked when he said he had been to our camp back in the early 2000s. Like, what? So I was joking with him. So I get to take credit for all this cool stuff you're doing. No, I don't. But Scott's amazing. If somebody type Scott Mulvihill's name in the chat room, Matt. Scott Mulvihill, he has a brand new video out that is just so amazing.
Called Joy.
It's just amazing, cleverly done, makes you feel good, and just a wonderful all-around musician, and maybe even a better human being, which I always like.
You bet.
So Scott Mulvihill is one. I saw on Bass Magazine's online, I saw on their page that Brandon Brown, that you guys did a story on Brandon Brown. He's an amazing one.
Yeah.
Brandon's great. And it just so happens that I remember Brandon from our second camp in 2001. He was a young kid from Memphis, and then he and his whole band moved out to LA, and they all hit it big. Next thing I see Brandon, he's on tour with Fergie, and he's the bass player for the Jackson Brothers, and it's like, whoa, he's out there doing it. And now he's lost a ton of weight. He's got muscles. He's got the Brandon Brown collection, BBC. He's killing it, man, just killing it. But then there's, I was going to say Ryan, but I remember seeing her on the bass.
Bass
You
magazine.
say Ryan Medora.
Medora, yeah.
Medora, she's wonderful.
She's got the
Wonderful.
book out, Bass Players You Should Know,
Right.
which
Have
is,
it,
I
right?
read it at the beginning of all this, and it's great. People should check it
Yeah.
out. I made a playlist from it, but I think she made a playlist from it too, just
Nice.
about the people.
So if you check out Ryan's book, yeah. So Deborah wrote, and Bass Magazine both wrote Scott Mulvihill, and they put up his website or something or the story. So that's very, very good. Ryan Medora is a great one. Check out her book, Bass Players You Should Know.
Yeah.
Those are good ones. But Rod's a good bass player. Matt, who asked the questions, a great bass player. There's so many of them all around.
And I'll point out, just plug in that I talked to Scott today, and he's going to do this show with us and play live. And you know what he plays live, it's just insane.
Amazing. And check out Scott Mulvihill's Tiny Desk concert too.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I
But
cut
he'll
you
be here fairly soon in this series, because I want to have him right out of the gate do some stuff for us, and he's great.
Nice. And what was the other part of that
Another
question?
question was kind of how to show emotion through music, right? Instead,
Okay.
when you, especially, I would assume that question has to do with the music, not the lyrics.
Sure.
Right.
Well, how do you show emotion when you talk? Right? For one, you got to forget the instrument you're talking with.
Yeah.
You got to forget the grammar. Not forget. You don't want to forget any of it.
Focus.
You just don't want to be focused, right? You don't want to be focused on the instrument you're speaking with. You don't want to be focused on the grammar and the adjectives and the music, the what I might call English theory,
Right.
right? I'm not focused on whether my hair is in place, right? It's what is it that I want to convey, right? When you get the tools out of the way, what's left usually is the emotion. That's one of the things, but that's one start. So if I have a bass in my hand and my focus is here, when I'm talking to you, you're there.
Yeah.
My focus should be there, not here. That means you're playing to the bass.
Yeah.
Right? It's there. I need this to disappear, which is why I practice. I get so good on it that I don't have to focus on it. So I can just focus on the emotion. The other thing is this: play less. Play less. Many times when we want to get excited or emotional or nervous, we play more. But there's less space. Right? The more space you put in, if you say, honey, do you love me? And she says, oh yeah, I love you. When you were born and you were and you were blah, 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 blah. You'd be like, please be quiet. But if she doesn't even answer you, but just gives you a hug and a kiss and whoa.
That works.
That works, right? So play less. Play less notes.
Yeah.
Playing less notes will allow you to play more emotion.
That's great. And it reminded me when you were talking, Victor, of a time that you're in your studio right now, and we were there together, and you were recording a bass part for a song you had not heard yet. And it was actually from Krista Detour's album. I think it was Flat Earth Diary, maybe. There's an artist that I played for, and Vic was recording the part. And the first pass through the song, I knew the song really well. I had played it live. And I think you attended to the lyrics live the first time and the emotions that were brought about by it. There was a point where she said something about a bird singing, and you threw a twirl, a little bird, kind of simulated bird thing. And that let me know as I was watching you that you were listening to the lyrics carefully. You weren't busy. You were ready for responding to the lyrics and putting the same emotion that she put into her voice into the bass in that moment. And I just remember I learned so much from that one moment about the emotions are being dictated by the artist in a lot of ways. And I have to figure out what the artist is after.
Yeah.
And then tap into that.
Number one, if you're hired by someone, what are they asking for?
Yeah.
And if someone wrote lyrics, as a musician, we need to know what they are.
Yeah.
Or else, how do we know what story we're helping tell, right?
Yeah.
Another quick Nashville story. There's a horn group called the Memphis Horns. They've played on so many records. I'm a soul man. Ba-dum, ba-dum. That's the Memphis Horns. Well, two of them, Andrew Love and It'll come back in a minute. The trumpet player. They were working on a record, and I'm new to Nashville. They heard about this young kid. They had me come and play some stuff with them uh, on their record. And this trumpet player, and why my brain won't pull his name, I'll get it before we get off. He pulls me aside and he says, "You know, Victor, he's like, you're a good player." He says, "But if you remember this, you have two ears." He said, "One of them is for you, the other one's for the rest of the band." He said, "If you remember that, you'll be one of the greats." But that was his kind way of saying, "You're good, but you're not listening well enough."
You've had a lot of kind people early on. That sounds great.
I know.
But you've passed that on too. I've watched you gently nudge tons of people over the years by encouraging them what to do right, as opposed to criticizing what they're doing wrong. And I think that's what makes you a wonderful educator. And we've mentioned the camp, and the base camp's going on. Is that right, Victor? Is it going?
It's coming up soon. I haven't made the announcements officially yet, but
Okay.
they will be happening. They will be happening online using Zoom, and they'll be happening over the next through months, through May through June. They'll be happening on Zoom. The announcements are going out very, very soon.
And there'll be openings, I assume, because it's
Yes.
virtual. There'll be a little more
We
openings.
will take more people,
Cool.
but we're not going to do our whole season. We're only going to do 3 of the camps.
And they can find that schedule when it comes out, like on your website, but also VIX Camps.
VixCamps.com,
VIX.
VixCamps.com, VIX Camps, yeah. We will also send out emails and we will blast social media so that everybody knows about it. But yes, we will be able to take more than the 60.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean,
Wayne Jackson, trumpet player, Memphis Horns.
there you go.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
yeah,
so
keep your eyes open. The camps are coming.
Yeah, I would encourage you, if you're watching this and you have friends. I mean, this is a kind of a lifetime opportunity, because you don't have to travel if you don't have the funds for that, or time off, or whatever.
Right.
That's one of the silver linings to me about this. All this is I'm seeing people play. I don't ever get to see play because they're at home, And I saw Kurt Smith from Tears for Fears play Mad World the other day with I think his granddaughter. It's just stuff like that that's special that you don't normally get to see.
Cool.
As a way of kind of sending us off and oh, go ahead.
One last thing. This was the coolest thing I've seen since we've been quarantined. My daughter turned me onto this. There's this band that she follows called Sure Sure. What that means, I don't know. But they did a tour. The whole band lives together. And they did a tour. But it was a tour of their house. Oh, wow. So the first night was in the kitchen. They played live in the kitchen. The next night, I think, was in the living room. I know they did one night in the hallway. And they were going to do a night in one of the band members' bedrooms. And you could either pay $35 for the whole tour each night,
Right.
or $10 a night. The bedroom night sold out so quickly that they added a second night to the tour. They made T-shirts with a floor plan of their house, a 1 in the kitchen, a 2 in the living room. Brilliant. I was one.
That's great.
I wish I thought of that one.
Yeah, that's cool. So do you mind playing, just before we end this, to play another song for everyone? And
I'd be happy to do it. The cool thing about this, time is we know where everybody is. You know,
I know where you are. I knew I could grab you tonight.
everyone's home. So Thursday, I'm doing this thing Thursday afternoon. Check my page. We're gonna have Marcus Miller online, and some other surprise
You
guests.
together, right? Both
Excuse
of you
me?
together. That's both
yeah.
of you together, right?
Together. Oh yeah, I'll be there interviewing him. We'll talk about SMV. Poogie Bell, one of the drummers that Marcus used, will be there, and some other surprise guests. It's going to be amazing. And the cool thing is that when we do these camps, right, we have a lot of great friends. I won't say anything, but who knows who might pop in on a class.
Right.
And our, late night specials, things. It's going to be amazing.
We're all home.
Silver linings, things
Yeah.
that we wouldn't been able to do, we can do right now. Shall we play something, Rod?
Play something, Vic.
All right, here we go.
thank you so much, Victor, for being patient with us. This is one of the reasons I wanted to start with you, among all the things, is you're always so gracious. And in case there were technical problems, you'd be okay with it.
Well, I have nowhere to be. Just
yeah, so
right
appreciate
here,
that.
man. Thanks for having me.
Thank you to John and Chris, the best editors in the world, for working with us on getting this series launched. We were originally going to do it as a written column, and then I just, through all this, I just thought, why not have it be something different, you know, and focus, allow us a little bit more entertainment value from that regard. So I appreciate their support of that. And thanks to everyone for hanging with us. Just so you know, this will be kind of collected, and then Base Magazine will post it. So for people who maybe had, I don't know what other engagements they would have, but couldn't stay on with us, they can watch it later, and people can kind of review parts of it, especially like the lesson stuff was just awesome. So they can go back and scroll back to that and review it. But look for probably sooner than we would normally do it in terms of the monthly magazine, but we'll host another one of these. Like I said, we've got Scott Mulvihill, Billy Sheehan, Mike Elizondo, Mike Brignadello, all have said they'd love to do this with us. So keep a lookout for the Nashville Lowdown going forward, and thank you so much for all the people that's helping us pull off the technical problems today and get past it. And thank you, Vic, again, for being the person you are, for being a great person, not just a great musician.
Thank you, Rod.
And I wish peace and health to all of you out there, and stay safe. And we'll see you again soon.
All right. Base Magazine, thank you.